Okay, we're going to move the bond presentation to the next item on the agenda.
Elizabeth Hennessy, formerly of William Blair, is now with Raymond James. William Blair announced somewhat abruptly after our meeting in July that they were getting out of the municipal bond market. And so...
Take this William Blair one.
Yeah, you could toss that one. And Ms. Hennessy has moved over to Raymond James, and I'll let her provide a brief update on that. We updated the board packet this afternoon with the presentation you're receiving hard copy of, so that you can refer either to board book or the hard copy. Mr. Gritchen, the updated report is in board book. It has the Raymond James logo on it.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Skikas. So just to update you on that, William Blair determined kind of unexpectedly that it was going to exit the municipal bond business entirely on July 18th. So we had our last day on July 31st, and on Monday I started with my team at Raymond James. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind for us, but I'm confident that we are in a good place at a firm that is really going to value public finance and be very stable for Illinois issuers. It is, last year in 2016, the number 7th ranked public finance firm in the country in terms of volume of municipal bond issues. So it's William Blair was, I think, number 23 or something. And importantly, it was number 2 in the nation with regard to the issuance of bonds for K-12 districts. So I think it's very focused in general obligation municipal bonds, and I'm happy to report that we are gainfully employed there. So the other good news about, if you can find any good news in all this, is that because William Blair is getting out of the business, they were generous in letting us access our files. So all of the records that we've kept for the district since we began working with you back in, I believe it was 2007, are intact.
That's good news.
Yeah, very good.
And before Liz starts, you'll see an attachment under her report and board book. You do not have a hard copy in front of you. It's called the G17. And so I know one of the board members submitted a question that we had an agreement with Liz under William Blair. Do we need to do another agreement under Raymond James? So we sent an email today acknowledging that we're working with Liz Hennessy as our underwriter, and an engagement email, but we said the board could not take formal action until September. Scott will, from now until September, just review that G17 and make sure it's exactly the same agreement that we were under with Elizabeth and for from when she was with William Blair.
Yeah, and I guarantee you there will be no cost difference.
And let Gary, I don't know if you heard that, she guaranteed there'll be no cost difference. If not, it will be better for us.
That's correct.
I like the word better.
Gary, Laura's just joined us.
All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, so just picking up where we left off last meeting in July, looking at the financing options and market update, I'll just briefly say that I've taken back a lot of your comments and questions. We were going to look at some additional options, put some additional metrics in the presentation, and those are included here. And I've added a few more options too. So not to overwhelm you with options, they're all in the same theme, looking at the refunding, which is of course a wonderful savings opportunity, and then $2 million of life safety, $3 million of working cash, and some variations on that. So let's go to page 4 and look at the market update again. We've had a very we've been trading within a range. The market's been strong. The blue line is that 20-year AAA rated municipal market data index that reflects the largest states across the nation that are rated AAA. and the 10 years is similar for the 10-year maturing bond. And we look at where your bonds were issued in 2015. Our low point was the Brexit. We had rates go up very quickly at the time of the U.S. presidential election when President Trump was elected. We had a March rate hike, a June rate hike, and now we expect a December rate hike is what's kind of baked in to the future here. But interest rates have been kind of stable. The thing that, of course, is affecting us right now for Illinois school districts is the fact that we don't have a resolution on the funding plan for Senate Bill 1. So even though the market's good, we want to get through that decision point, which we hope, as I know you do, that it will be soon. Let's go to page 5. This is the yield curve, and this looks at interest rates from year 1 through year 30. And the current MMD yield curve is second to the flattest as it's been in the past 6 years. And what flat means is that longer-term rates are low, and really the second lowest in the last 6 years, but short-term rates have come up. And again, that's because the Federal Reserve has increased that short-term Fed funds rate 3 times, and it's expected to do it again, but it affects that short end of the yield curve. Shouldn't hurt you too badly because the bonds that we're looking at refunding are more in the 10-year range where rates are somewhat low. So let's go on to the financing plan from here. Page 7 is the outstanding debt service. That's the principal and interest. And what we did to try to make this hopefully a little clearer for everybody is to put a letter above the columns so you can see how different things are calculated. So column A is the equalized assessed valuation, and that does reflect the district's increase up to $749 million with the 2016 EAV. So that was an increase. B is the debt service extension base. This is part of the tax limitation law, and the debt service extension base is the maximum amount of principal and interest that the district can pay back on non-referendum bonds in any year. So it was determined in 1994. Simply, under the tax cap, they said whatever you levied for principal and interest for non-referendum bonds like working cash or life safety bonds in that year, 1994 levy year, you can go ahead and continue to issue bonds and use that amount to pay those bonds back. So it's a limitation, and the philosophy is that whatever you had in 94, you can keep on levying. If you have bonds you need to pay off, you just can't go beyond that. Then in 2009, they added a CPI factor onto that. So now, as you can see, in 2016, that debt service extension base went up by 0.7%. In 2017, it will go up by 2.1%. And then going forward, we've assumed 1.5%. We can revisit this, though, as time goes on, because if we get a tax freeze, there's some versions of that bill that might affect that and make it 0 for a few years. But 1.5% we think is a conservative assumption in that the Fed and the government is targeting and seeing more or less a 2% CPI. So we want to be a little below that, a little conservative on our assumption going forward. Going across the columns, we've got C then, which is the non-referendum current debt service. So this is the current principal and interest amount that's being paid. And as you can see, it's about $1 million a year or so. And again, that's the amount annually that cannot exceed that debt service extension base, which is B. And the bonds that make up those non-referendum bonds are the Series 2015A life safety bonds.
So if we issue new bonds.
Keep this very simple. Column C cannot exceed column B.
Right. And if you go to column F on the far right, that's B minus C. So
Okay.
that shows you what additional principal and interest on these non-referendum bonds you could pay off based on your current situation.
Okay.
Column D reflects referendum-approved bonds, and those include the Series 2015B bonds, which refunded the Series 2006 referendum-approved bonds, so they're still considered referendum bonds, and the 2007B bonds. And those are the bonds we're looking at refunding here for savings coming up on their call date, December 1 of 2017. So if you add column C and D together, that gives you the total debt service being paid back by the taxpayers through the tax levy in the bond and interest fund. And if you take that total debt service annual amount and you divide it by the equalized assessed valuation times 100, you get the tax rate, the bond and interest part of the tax rate. So the tax rate, is made up of all the operating funds, the ed fund, the O&M, and all those funds. The bond and interest fund is a separate levy on top of that. So it's part of the overall tax levy. And so right now, it's at about 69.5 cents.
Anybody have any questions? A lot of this is review from what we covered last month. Ms. Hennessy, based on the feedback from some of the board members, just tried to make it more user-friendly so when we post this online, the community can understand it.
Right.
Page 8, Liz?
Page 8 is the graphic of the chart you just saw. So the dark blue bars are the referendum-approved debt service. The light green bars are the life safety debt service or the non-referendum debt service. And then that line, the blue line, reflects that debt service extension base, which again increases by CPI annually. And you can see there's room underneath that line. The green bars could go all the way up to that blue line, but of course they don't.
Okay. 9?
So 9 talks about the Series 2007B bonds and the new money options we're going to talk about today. So as I mentioned, those 2007B bonds are callable December 1, 2017 and can be refunded within 90 days of that call date, or at earliest, it can close September 1 of 2017. So you also are looking at life safety work. I know your architect submitted that to ISB for approval. You're also looking at possibly issuing working cash fund bonds. Now, working cash fund bonds have a separate statutory limit, and that limit is a calculation, which I can go through with you, but it's basically 85% of the maximum education fund tax extension. Right now, for you, the net working cash bond limit is $16.4 million. So that was one of the things I think Tim asked for at our last meeting, so I wanted
the options we're discussing are nowhere near our limit.
Correct. So you've got lots of room within that working cash. We're maybe looking at $3 million, so obviously a good margin there. Okay, so the options that we're going to go over are option 1, just the refunding for savings alone. Option 2, and the 3 alternate option 3s consider issuing refunding and new money bonds at the same time so that the savings on the refunding bonds offset some of the additional cost on the life safety and possibly working cash new money bonds.
So to save time, I would ask the board, option 1, which we covered back in July, and we already gave permission to the architect to submit the life safety amendment. We know we got to, so for the sake of time, do we skip option 1, or do you think it's okay to just have Liz touch on it to show people? Because we know we got to do this work, and we
I'm fine
already.
skipping it.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah. Yes.
Laura, you okay? Dr. Keene, you okay?
So just to summarize that, the present value savings, that's 318. It's on your summary sheet.
Yes. Is this on page 10 too? Yes. So we looked at the savings on page 10, $36 a year for the owner of a $350,000 home Over those 10 years, it totals about $359. But we talked about, Dr. Keene, to try to put that in today's dollars for you. So that is $318 on a present value basis. So what it's worth in today's dollars is $318 versus $360.
And so the total net present value savings is $2,634,000.
That's correct.
That's the total gross amount for the district that we
It's the
save.
present value.
Present value of those savings.
Correct.
That's our baseline that's going to be our baseline. Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Is that
Okay.
helping what she?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so option 2, which is refunding plus the 2 million life safety, that's on page 12.
That's on page 12, and this is pretty much just adding life safety bonds, paying them off over 7 years, 2 million of life safety bonds. Very low interest rate on that. And it shows that it makes pretty much no difference to the taxpayers for the first 7 years, but then in the last 3 years, there's that $36 savings again, because the life safety bonds under column K on the left side of the page, those are paid off in 7 years. So those payments offset the savings from the refunding. Yet when those are paid off, you get the savings then in years 7 through 10. So total savings to that owner of the $350,000 home is $93. And present value is $74. If we say, look, we've got present value savings of $2,634,000 from the refunding, but we're now getting $2 million, our net present value savings is $634,675 at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we do the 2 million in work, life safety and nothing else, taxpayers will see no increase for the first 7 years. And then once those are paid off, they'll see about anywhere from $74 to $93 in savings.
Yeah, over those last 3 years.
For those last 3
And
years.
it's important to point out also, which we talked about last time, that in year 10, in 2026, after the referendum bonds were all paid off, then the tax rate would go to 0 unless the district determined to do something else with the bonds.
And they would
So-
see a significant savings, an
That's right.
additional.
That's 55-cent decrease, and it would be about $505 on a $350,000 market value home.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? So, worst case scenario, if we only do, which the board pretty much approved last week, if we only do the 2 million in life safety, it's best to pay them off in 7 years to provide no impact to the taxpayer.
Correct.
Okay?
Can I ask a question,
Yes.
please? So that 7 years, though, it's more than just the impact on the taxpayers. Is that sort of the standard
Well,
time frame for life safety, or?
it's a couple things. You know, the life safety survey has to be done every 10 years, so
Okay.
theoretically, and I think it was done a couple years ago.
13.
13. So you want to have that payback maybe cleared out for your next life safety survey. So I
Okay.
think that makes sense.
Sure.
And then just the payback is a one-for-one offset too. So those are the reasons why we chose that. I mean, you could go longer or shorter, but it seemed to meet those criteria.
All right, Liz, this is where you're going to have to put on your, when we start talking option 3A, 3B, 3C.
Right. Okay, so 3A, 3B, and 3C are what we looked at last time. Or 3A and 3B we looked at last time, and I said, I like 3C. So I brought you 3C, and then I did some variations on 3C. But let's just review 3A. 3A is the refunding plus 2 million life safety and 3 million working cash fund bonds. And the goal here was to try to stretch out the payback so that the impact on the taxpayer was minimal, least impactful. And you can see when you look at the net tax rate increase or decrease, it's only about a penny for the first 10 years, or 0 for the first 4 years, about a penny the next 6 years, and then because otherwise you would have been debt-free, there still are some payments on the bonds, which result to about 10 cents a year. So net, it's an increase over that period, a 14-year period, of $436 to the taxpayer. In present value, that's $310
Over 14 years.
over 14 years.
So they basically pay $310 in additional taxes over the course of 14 years.
That's right. But if you look at that tax rate, you can see it's pretty stable at that 69-70 cent level, and then it drops down in 2027. So from a real impact, a taxpayer might not notice that at all, but you need to know that you are extending debt 4 years past where it otherwise would be paid off. That's why there is, in fact, a net cost.
But that net cost is, it doesn't show on here, is actually less than what they're currently paying for them.
Exactly.
So they will still see some savings possibly.
Absolutely. In fact, they will see, instead of a 55-cent decrease in 2027, it would be only 50 cents still. It's $454 on a $350,000 home in that year 2027. It just doesn't go down to 0.
And so we could take out $3 million in working cash. Are these capital or taxable?
These are all for capital. So remember our conversation last time? If you borrow working cash bonds on a tax-exempt basis, it has to be used for capital projects. If you borrow it on a taxable basis, you can use it either for capital projects or operating expenses if you need to.
So when I first look at your sheet here, and I'm, just so the board understands, I'm trying to ask some general questions to make sure I'm what the common viewer would maybe think when they're watching this. When I first looked at this sheet, and I see the 436 in the bottom right-hand corner, it looks like borrowing this money is actually costing the taxpayer an additional $436 over 14 years. But what you're telling me is they're actually still going to see a savings on their tax bill.
It's still going to cost them $436 versus not doing those new bonds.
Right.
Because there is interest, and that's one thing about this 14-year schedule. It is cost more interest because we're keeping the bonds out longer
Okay.
than some of the other options we've looked at. But you're right. Practically, will they feel that impact? Probably not, because number one, the refunding is offsetting the impact of the first 10 years and then the last 10 years, because all the bonds are gone at that time. There's a 50-cent decrease. It would be a bigger decrease if we didn't have these bonds, but they would not really feel an impact.
Their tax
because
bill's not going to go up. Am I safe in saying that?
That's true, yes.
So that even though
It's just higher than they otherwise would
Right.
have paid.
so instead of saving a larger amount of money, they're not saving as much, but their tax bill is not changing.
Correct.
Okay.
Not going up.
Not going up.
So here, our net present value savings is our savings of the $2,634,000 plus $5 million. So net present value savings is actually a cost. It's $2,365,000. So page 15 is a graphic of this, and you can see the blue bars, light blue bars, are the 2 million life safety bonds. The orange bars are the working cash, and you can see how they extend those 4 years beyond. But you also see the big dip from 2026 to 27. So I think that's what, we're talking about.
Okay. Any board member have any questions on this?
I'm missing something here. Okay, just look at option 3A versus 3B.
On the summary?
Look at interest costs on new money. Okay, the present value is the same for both 3A and 3B, net present value. But the total interest costs on the new bonds for 3A is 1.5 million, and for 3B it's 450,000. So shouldn't that be shouldn't that difference be present value to something? To make it equivalent to the present value total that the average taxpayer is going to pay, which is basically $19 for the average
The
taxpayer?
difference. Well, the net present value savings just refers to the savings on the refunding, which is the same in every option, right? Because that does not change, plus the current value of the new money proceeds you're getting, which is the $5 million. So in today's dollars, there's no difference. In future dollars, there is a difference, and I think it's, there is a $19 difference between that present value total to the taxpayer, and I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's just, I think it's the different long-term payment structure, the interest cost over time.
Right, so I mean, this 3A and 3AB are not equivalent. It's costing the district more money. So it's $19 on average, or the present value of the difference between $1,541,000 versus $451,000. So the
Yes.
present value of the $900,000. I guess that's the number
That's the future value.
That's the number that's missing here. And in terms of us as a district, that's the number that I'd be interested in knowing.
So
Because
taking
that's
those
basically
interest
the
costs.
difference between those two alternatives summed up. And we've got it for the individual homeowner, but, so the present value of $900,000 between those two options.
Okay.
I think that number's missing.
So can we have her go through, because you're
Oh, yeah,
going
yeah,
off
I'm
the
just-
summary page, and
Sure.
so maybe we don't
Yeah.
lose the audience.
Because I think for the present value, I was just trying to be simplistic in terms of what you're getting today in
Okay.
today's dollars versus.
No, I think you're
the same.
correct. It's just, I mean, Gary might be able to help me out on this, but please go ahead.
So is
Okay.
B, the lower interest rate, so B is $2 million in life safety, $3 million in working cash,
The same dollars
same
up front.
dollars, except you're doing a 7-year scale.
7-year payback, yeah, on 3B. So for both the working cash and life safety, the working cash is a little shorter than the life safety because we want to regain that life safety authority a little sooner. So
Liz,
So that's kind of why I said, gosh, we're trying to make this option. Honestly, I would rather just get rid of 3B because I just think it confuses the matter. It's a bit shorter amortization than 3C, but it's an increase in the first 6 years and then a decrease to the taxpayers in the last 3 years. It's just a different way of arranging the repayment. So I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. I think we used it as an offset to 3A.
So as our consultant, you're saying this is really not in our best interest?
I just don't think it makes a lot of sense in your consideration. I mean, 3A is, the long, more expensive interest option. I would turn your attention to 3C, which I think makes sense because if we're looking at an increase, which we are when we look at the 2 million and the 3 million payback versus just the 2 million life safety, which I think makes sense on the 7 years. If we do them both over 10 years and make them the same payback as when your referendum bonds, then you can see an even increase or decrease in each year, and you don't have that up in some years, down in the other. So in this case, you're getting your 5 million, again, 3 million tax exempt for projects, and you have a net increase versus the refunding of 4 cents, which is $34 a year on the home. All your bonds then are maturing at the same time in 2026, and you have that nice drop. In this case, it's a 63-cent drop, including the non-referendum bonds. And the total cost, for this option, which I think is a fair representation of what you're trying to accomplish with the 2 million and the 3 million, is $340, or present value of $301. So that is that. And this 3C has less interest costs than option 3A, slightly more than 3B, but it has an even impact. And if you look at the graph on the next page, you can see very clearly that all your bonds kind of fall off at the same time, same point in time.
So if the board were to do capital working cash dollars, it's in its best interest to either do A or C.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, would be C makes the most sense?
Yes, yes. Even though it's a slight tax increase on an annual basis, it's cheaper overall in interest. All your bonds are paid off at the same time.
Okay?
So that's kind of what I summarize on page 20. And it also leaves room in the debt service extension base if you need to do additional funding for any reason between now and then, should some catastrophic thing happen, or we continue to have state problems. That's the thing that 3B didn't. 3B didn't leave you any room in that debt service extension base in those first few years. And then, as I mentioned, 3C, the debt is retired at the same time as the referendum bonds. So let me just pause there and see if you agree with me on 3C versus 3A for the $5 million proceeds.
Anybody have questions or concerns?
Gary, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yep.
Laura?
I like 3C. I mean, it's consistent and it gives us that extra option and saves us from having to go back out. If we do the 2 and the 3 all at once for the capital funds.
Correct. So 3C is still all capital.
Right.
So 3C is all capital. Now, when she go, the option of 3C1,
Yeah. 3C1 is the same as 3C, except the working cash bonds are issued on a taxable basis. That's one of the things we talked about last time.
and when you say taxable, it's not taxable to us or to the taxpayer, it's taxable to the people buying the bonds.
That's correct. So the purchasers of those bonds will have to pay income tax on the income, the interest earnings. If
But
they're
the-
tax exempt, they do not.
But the yellow, so the impact to our taxpayers is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's pretty darn close. And the reason is, you know, it's just not that much. So where you really see the difference is in the interest rate. Instead of 251, which is the tax exempt rate, which you can see on the 2 million, it's 2.93.
But it's still pretty much a 4% increase across the board.
4-cent increase, it's like, I think we go up $1 for the taxpayers, $35 versus $34.
And that option gives the district some flexibility in the event pension cost shifts, or if there's any issues, or if we had to make a lease payment. Does that give you more flexibility? I know that was
It
one
does,
thing. We were
absolutely.
looking into that a little bit with, you were gonna check with bond counsel
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
If the district was ever to get lucky to lease any property, can they do that under the capital working cash? Or does it have to be under the tax exempt working cash? Obviously, the tax
Well, the
exempt.
taxable can go either way.
Right, so if the district wanted to lease property or pay off a license, they could do that under the taxable.
Yes.
Could they do that under the capital? That was where we were,
That's right. I need to get back to you on that. I'm sorry. There was a few things that went
No,
on
I
after
got
that
you.
meeting. So
I got
will.
you.
I will definitely make a note right here.
because I think that's an important thing for the board to know.
So the question is, can you make lease payments on a building or property?
Correct.
With the proceeds of a tax exempt working cash bonds?
Correct.
Yeah.
if a local municipality or another taxing body said, hey, we have this land
Yeah.
and you could put a soccer field on it, but we can't sell it to you, we can only lease it to you or pay a license to it.
Right.
And the district wanted to use that money. That's a hypothetical. There is no situation like that right now, but
Right. Okay.
we're always looking to expand our property access because we're landlocked.
So I'll get back to you on that. My experience tells me that you could for the first 3 years, but then you just have to watch what you do in terms of investing that money after the next 3 years. So you would have to make sure you don't invest that money that you got from the bond proceeds at a yield that's higher than the yield you're paying, a tax-exempt yield on the bonds.
Who helps us with that? So we go through the
Bond
Cook
council
County-
will give you a.
If we go through the township treasurer though.
Yeah, they'll have to monitor it.
So-
But interest rates are so low, it's unlikely that that would happen right
Okay.
now. But we would have to monitor it.
I have a comment. So there's a $79,000 difference in interest rate between the taxable and non-taxable, but it gives us a greater degree of freedom to use that $3 million. Because it's
Correct.
$79,000. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah, speak up a little louder, Liz.
Yes.
Did you hear her, Gary? She said yes.
Yes, I heard. Okay.
So we can let Liz go through the summary page, which is on page 23.
Yep. And 3C2 was 4 million, all working cash. I don't know if that even makes sense now because you already did submit your life safety, right?
Yeah, I think the
So-
board feels the most comfortable, just from my hearing. I'll let the rest of the board that's present tonight. We know we have 2 million of life safety work submitted, and we know whether if we went through a petition phase or not. We know that work needs to be done. So my recommendation to the board would be, let's not mess with that 2 million. Whatever gets approved by the state, we should do life safety bonds for that amount, so we know if something goes wrong or if the petition period goes wrong, we could still make the repairs that are needed to the district,
Got it.
and we're not on any holding. So 3C2, to me, is not realistic.
Okay.
It's, it's transparency that I would think the board would want to achieve would be bond out for life safety, what's life safety, and then consider our options with working cash. So I'm thinking C1 or 3C are our two best options.
And
So
3C1
Liz-
gives you the extra flexibility for a minor
Right,
cost.
3C1 gives us the flexibility, so if we can do whatever we need to do to survive
Right.
as a district. The board doing the working cash, the life safety, the board's gone through that. There is no petition period. So if the board decides, we should, the finance council will probably meet, maybe we'll have another meeting, or if not, by that September meeting, the board should engage in a thorough discussion and invite the public to come and give comments or to listen. But you would probably want some type of answer by September.
September 12th. So if we turn to the financing schedule,
Because that's a sheet that's not in the packet.
it's not in the packet, sorry, Gary. So,
It's here.
Thought I saw it. Okay.
yeah. So what we've got is on August 8th, you reviewed the life safety and options and you submitted to ISB. For your September 12th meeting, we'd hope maybe you've got enough information to make a decision and a recommendation on one of these options. And if so, we would discuss that and move forward with the resolution of intent to issue working cash bonds. So that's the legal document that allows you to start what's called the petition period. So once that resolution's approved,
So whether it's capital or taxable working cash, we need to do that after the 12th,
that's correct.
okay?
Then we would publish that notice of intent and a notice of public hearing in the landmark, because you also need a public hearing on the issue of both working cash bonds and life safety bonds. So that would also occur on September 13th. We'd try to get it in the landmark or thereabouts.
Do we need the public hearing on the issuing of the life safety bonds,
Yes.
even if there's no pavement or playground equipment?
Yes.
Okay, and we
Yep.
did that last time for these other amendments,
did
correct?
indeed.
Okay, just wanted to make
Yep.
sure.
We did those extra hearings as well.
Yes,
For
right.
those specific
Because of the pavement,
projects.
right.
Yes. So then that would be scheduled for your committee of the whole meeting on September 26th, the public hearing. Published, of course, and posted at the district office and on the website. The petition period would end October 12th, presuming we get it in the paper on September 13th. Then you would receive the parameters, life safety, working cash bond resolutions, and the refunding resolutions in your board packet for consideration by the board on October 10th. In the meantime, we would set forth our meeting with Standard & Poor's to re-up the district's bond rating, which is currently AA+. That would bring us into the market probably around the week of October 18th and close the bond issue, get your bond proceeds on October 31st.
And there's some benefit of issuing both the working cash and life safety at the same time.
And refunding,
And refunding.
yes.
Because then we're not paying separate costs to legal counsels and,
Rating agency fees,
Okay.
right, we want to try to consolidate that if possible.
so the board roughly has a month to either call me, or if they want to petition Gary to do a special meeting, or if they need to send in questions to me to ask you anything that they're not thinking of now. So when they come on the 12th, we should be able to have a thorough discussion and kind of lay out there, it's either 3C, 3C1, or just do the life safety. Is that a pretty good summary? Everybody okay?
So Liz, is there a difference between the notice requirements for taxable versus non-taxable working cash?
No difference.
Okay.
Does anybody want to take a look at page 23 real quick, since Liz did that, and that just kind of summarized, and I think that's where Dr. Keene's questions were coming from.
So it's a real quick summary of all of the options. As we mentioned, one is just the refunding alone. Two is the refunding with just $2 million of life safety. So you can see you've got the bond proceeds in that second set of rows, working cash for capital projects only, or working cash for operations or capital projects. And 3A is that long 14-year repayment. Option 3B is a 7-year repayment where we use up the debt service extension base, which I recommend we kind of not do that one to leave you extra flexibility. 3C is the 10-year repayment of both life safety and working cash. 3C1 is also 10-year repayment, but the working cash is taxable, so a little higher interest cost. And then 3C2 is the $4 million, which I think we determined was not, that was $4 million just working cash if we were going to skip the life safety and give yourself funds for capital in that case.
So if you're voting as a board, obviously you can vote for anything, but we would prefer your choices be either 2, 3C, or 3C1. 2 is just life safety, 3C is life safety and capital working cash, and 3C1 is life safety, taxable working cash.
So for 3C, the 10-year payback, what's our cushion for additional debt service? Is that on one of these columns?
It's not on the columns, but it is in the chart.
Okay.
And if you go back to page 18 and you look at remaining debt service extension-based capacity, which is right in the middle, column D, you can see you've got about $250,000 a year for the next 4 years. Then it goes up to $324,000, then up to $1.3 million. And it jumps up to $1,355,000 after the 2015 life safety bonds are paid off. So it gives you a good amount of flexibility both now and then when those bonds are paid off. versus 3B.
Yeah, the 7-year, there was basically $3,000 or whatever. It's
Yeah.
basically nothing there.
It took us down to
So
nothing.
in case we have to borrow more, we have, I could see the logic behind it, like you said, Laura.
Liz, it would be important for you tonight or tomorrow morning when you get back to the office, if you could email this schedule
You bet.
to Mary Ann so she could add it to the packet before it gets posted publicly. And I'd ask that you'd submit the watermark or something in the header or footer that says draft, to make sure it's clear it's a draft.
Sure.
So no one would assume that this is the schedule we're sticking to. And under where you have the landmark as the newspaper, I mean, the district switches between the landmark and the suburban life, we kind of alternate.
Okay.
So if you want to put district newspaper, that may be
Okay.
a little more general.
Sure.
Does anybody have any other questions for Ms. Hennessy? Gina, are you okay?
Yeah, good.
Gary?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Ramona, Laura,
Oh, good.
Wes?
Good.
Thank you, Liz.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Great job
Thanks so
updating
much.
us.
Thanks
I'll
for
be in
having
touch.
me. Okay, great.